her Highland devil.
Written by Barbara Bard and published by Starfall Publications. Book from Highlanders Fighting for Love series. Save more with our ebook and audiobook bundles on our website, starfallpublicationsbooks.com. Subscribe for more audiobooks. Enjoy.
Chapter 1. October 1718, Hawkshire, England. "Ronnie!" Gabby screamed inaudibly from where she slightly crouched. She was on her way to her parents' bedchamber to talk about something they were hiding from her. When she reached the doors, she saw that one of them was slightly ajar. Now, as she listened in on them from behind the door, she realised that there was more than one secret. The other one affected her directly. "What about her?" her father asked. "We need to finalise everything regarding her marriage. We need to tell her as soon as possible," her mother stated. "I still hope we are doing the right thing," her father said. "The right thing? Henry, there is nothing right about any of this. If there is going to be a war, securing our oldest daughter's future is a necessity. Once she marries Ronnie, we can be certain that our bloodline will continue." Gabby blinked anxiously. She wasn't so sure what she had just heard. "Ronnie? Her Ronnie? How do you think she will take it?" her father asked. "I do not know, but I am certain that Ronnie will explain better to her. Besides, you and I didn't find it easy when we were brought together. We were strangers, remember?" "Yes. But if she gets to be with Ronnie, she can at least have some part of the fairy tale she had always craved. She gets to be with someone she grew up with. That is a good thing, and I hope she sees that." Gabby was breathing faster now. Ronnie knew of this. She was going to be betrothed to him and nobody told her, not even her trusted father. "What shall we do if the king asks for an inquisition?" Lady Diana asked. Gabby could hear the panic and worry in her mother's voice when she asked. This was what she was hoping to discuss with her parents. She waited to listen more. She wanted to hear everything. Her parents had always done their best to prevent her from having anything to do with the court or politics. She never could understand why. "We shall allow His Highness to see to the matter," her father said warily. "He will realise that there is nothing to find. It baffles me why he does not concentrate on Peter. That idiot is so good at leaving no trail behind, framing me for his own misdeeds. John is a fool," her mother spat. "You have been loyal to him since the beginning. When no one believed in him, you did. You were one of his first supporters, and yet he would choose to turn against a loyal subject and a good friend, rather than investigate his new advisors." "Lower your voice, Diane," her father hushed. "Our enemies are dangerous and the walls have ears. If our private conversation should reach the king, we will be found guilty of treason." Her mother sighed. "If there is ever going to be a war on England, we will most likely be the first target. What if the king refuses to send reinforcements? Do we settle for a deal with the Scots?" The word Scot sent a chill down Gabby's spine. Her parents were having a discussion about the barbarians she had just heard about. "I doubt that will happen," said her father. "The king knows that if war comes, we shall be the first target being at the entrance of England, and if the entrance is conquered, the whole of England will then be in serious trouble." "The king is a fool," her mother said again. "We need to do something fast, for we are not certain how this could end." "What do you mean?" "I mean, our Gabby." When Gabby heard her name, her heart began to beat faster. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. That night, when she got to her room, she couldn't stop thinking about everything she had heard. It was like her life didn't even belong to her anymore. Could this be the reason why Ronnie had not visited the castle for a while? "Is everything okay, my lady?" Sophie asked. They were in the room together. Sophie was just 17 years old, but she had been Gabby's maid and sole confidant for as long as she could remember. She had always supported Gabby, and she always spoke her mind freely around her. Gabby's parents were completely unaware of the extent of their friendship. "No, Sophie, everything is not okay." Sophie walked closer to her on the bed. "Would you like to talk about it?" she asked. "I think I am to marry Ronnie," Gabby blurted. "Oh," was all Sophie could say. Then Gabby remembered that Sophie had once mentioned it. "Hold on, did you know of this?" she asked Sophie. "No, my lady. But it was just really obvious that if your parents would settle for someone that they think you would appreciate, who else would they pick if not your closest friend and cousin?" Gabby sighed. This was a nightmare. How am I supposed to react in front of him? How do I even talk to him? "Do you think he knows about this?" Sophie asked. "Yes, I am certain of it. It would explain why he has not been in the castle for the past few days. He knew. Well, perhaps he finds it difficult to comprehend as well." "Oh, I doubt that, Sophie. He must have known this for days. I had to overhear from my parents, who clearly are not yet sure whether they are going to tell me or not." "Well, it must be difficult for them too, knowing how stubborn you can be," Sophie said. "They are not the ones being forced to get married," Gabby blurted, although she very well knew that at a point in time, one or both of her parents must have felt the way she now felt. They were both victims of an arranged marriage, so she was even more annoyed that they put her in the same situation. Deep down, she knew there was something worse that she needed to think about: the possibility of a war with the Highlanders. This was, after all, the reason why her parents were bent on her marriage to Ronnie. However, she couldn't think of anything worse than having to confront her best friend, who was soon to become her husband. She took a deep breath as her mind drifted through her predicament. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Gabby opened her eyes as the brightness of the daylight hit her eyes. Her eyes felt like they needed to rest, but her mind was unsettled. She knew why Ronnie had not been coming to the castle, but she desperately wanted to see him, or at least talk to him. Besides that, she had been avoiding her mother for days. She just couldn't bring herself to talk to her. "My lady, Her Grace would like to speak to you," Sophie said to her minutes after she had taken her bath. "Tell her I have taken a walk," she said without looking at her. "I think you need to talk to her and tell her your mind. There is definitely a reason why she has not told you." Her father had not been home. He had been absent for days due to a royal meeting with the prince. Gabby finally turned around to face Sophie. "I understand, Sophie, but that would mean that all this is real." "But it is real." "Yes, I know, but it would become more real." "Wedding? To Ronnie? It frightens me, Sophie. The whole story with the Highlanders frightens me as well. But I believe the sooner you address this with your mother, the better it will be, and then you can move on." Gabby said nothing as Sophie left. She realised that Sophie was right. She was always right, and she always knew what to say. She marched to her mother's room. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Lady Diane was shocked to find out that Gabby knew about the wedding and the Highlanders. She also felt relieved because she didn't know how to break the news. "So, what else do you think I should know?" Gabby asked, arms akimbo. "The Highlanders are likely to strike again. There was a war that raged on for years while you were much younger between England and Scotland. We are the only ones that stand between them and England. If the king refuses to assist us, then we have to do whatever we can on our own. We do not know what will happen. I swear to you, no harm will come to you. This is why we want to conclude all that has to do with your marriage with Ronnie. Both of you shall be wedded before the end of the week." Gabby gasped. She thought she knew everything, but clearly this was one thing she never expected. "This week?" she asked. Yes, unbelievable. So I won't even have time to become accustomed to having Ronnie as my betrothed. Now I have to become an impromptu wife before the end of the week. Her mother sighed. Please try to understand. He can protect you. I do not care about that, Mother. I should not have to find out for myself. You should have told me sooner. I know, darling. I sincerely apologise for that. Gabby inhaled sharply. Things were happening so fast, and she couldn't comprehend how she was supposed to take all this in at once. I still do not understand how I'm supposed to look at him from now on. This is really silly, Mother. It is not fair. Her mother sighed for the 1,000th time that day and pulled her closer to her. I'm sorry, darling. Everything is for your own good. We do not know in whose favour the coming war would end. When is Father coming back? Gabby asked. Tomorrow. We are desperately hoping that the king will comply and send us the help we need. This has been going on for weeks, and yet we receive nothing. What happens if Father comes back without any help? Then we prepare for war, and may God help us. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. But they really have fine men. Fine men who drink blood with their bare hands, another woman said. They are savages. What do you expect? Replied another. Have you seen any of the Scottish women? Asked another. Well, I was told they are really beautiful, but they dress indecently, the Countess replied. Gabby frowned as she listened to her mother and her friends. She was no longer surprised that her mother knew so much about this, but never cared to tell her. I really do hope that we would not have to go to war with those mad people anytime soon. They are ruthless, one of the women said. Well, I hope so too, the Countess replied. My husband is working day and night to protect us. Long live Prince John. Long live Prince John, the rest of the women chorused. Gabby knew she had to find out more since her mother thought her too young to comprehend the situation. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Gabby was quiet and alone in the garden for the rest of that day. She wished her father was around. It would have been a lot easier if she could talk to him instead of her mother. Hello there. When Gabby heard that familiar masculine voice, she coloured instantly. It was time. Standing up, she turned to face Ronnie. Hello, Ronnie, she said to him, hoping that the colour would have left her cheeks. How have you been? He asked, but she only nodded. Gabby couldn't reply. She was looking at him as if she was seeing him for the first time. How did he grow up taller than she was within the last couple of days? Well, he had always been taller. She just never noticed it more than she did now. His brown hair was curly, forming a fringe around his round face. He wasn't all that cute, like she had always imagined her husband would be, but he could have been worse. Her eyes narrowed down to his shoulders. They didn't look anywhere close to the shoulders of a seasoned warrior. Instead, they were the shoulders that have always held her close any time she cried or complained about anything. Well, I thought I should come see you, he said in a frantic tone. How are you faring with everything that is going on? Gabby looked at him sharply. He already knew that she knew. You spoke to Mother? She asked, and he nodded. When did you find out? She asked. The last time I was here. Your father told me what is to happen, he replied. So, what do you think? She asked, studying his face. I think we will make a good couple. We have always been great friends, and I know almost everything about you. What better way to become a good husband? Gabby managed a smile. He was right about that. He was the closest man to her, and he knew everything there was to know about her. Still, the feminine intuition in her heart told her that Ronnie was not the one for her, or was that denial because he wasn't a hero from a fairy tale? He was a good man, handsome in his own way, but she couldn't help feeling that something was wrong. She felt his strong hand on her arm as he pulled her closer to face him. As she turned, she was suddenly aware of how close they were standing. It wasn't the first time, but now it felt strange. His face was inches away from hers, and his blue eyes promptly reminded her of her father's. He also had the same pale skin and long nose common to the MacKenzie bloodline. His fingers went through her brown hair. "Your hair is indeed beautiful," he whispered into her ear. Gabby found herself blushing uncomfortably, unable to meet his eyes. It was really odd hearing such things from a man whom she had long considered as her brother and her best friend. Stranger still, to think of him as her husband. "Can we not do this yet?" she managed to say. "Do what?" Getting overzealous. "We are not even properly betrothed yet." "Do not be such a tease," he said, pulling her by the waist. She gasped. "This is most inappropriate," she squirmed. "I should think so," he said, bringing his lips down to hers. Instead, she turned her left cheek to him. She wasn't ready for that. She could feel his disappointment as his lips brushed against her cheek. "We are in plain view of the battlements. Father will not be happy if he is notified of our indiscretions. Even if we are to be wedded, you are required to be patient with me. This is still a bit strange. Don't you think so?" He frowned, his ears reddened from the rejection. "This is not the first time you would court your father's disapproval. This is entirely something else, isn't it? Do I not appeal to you? Do you not love me?" Gabby inhaled. Of course she loved him. She had loved him all her life, but she only loved him as a brother. Loving him as something more would take time. Her stomach cringed at the mere thought of Ronnie being her husband. "I still await your response," he said grimly. "Of course I do love you," she said, averting her gaze. "Just that, I am yet to acclimate to the idea of us being betrothed. And when you touch me like this, it makes me—" She wanted to say awkward, but stopped. "Your hesitation is only natural. I understand if you need time to get accustomed to it. I very much know that with time you will yearn for my touch." Gabby breathed a sigh of relief as she heard this. He seemed to have accepted her explanation. A part of her hoped that he was right, and that with time she would get to love him, but the other part of her detested the idea of having to love him. This was now her reality, and she would need to deal with it. With the way everything seemed, she may never find the man she so desired. Maybe her mother was right. The man she wanted only existed in children's fairy tales. "What are you thinking about?" Ronnie asked. "How come you are this excited about all this?" she found herself asking. "Well, perhaps because I have loved you all my life." Gabby gulped. This was unbelievable. "You may not believe me, but that is the truth. I have never been this close to anyone as I am close to you. You are brilliant, beautiful, and very innocent. I admire everything about you, Gabby. There is no other woman for me. When Father brought up the idea, I almost burst out in joy. It took a lot to suppress my excitement. I couldn't think of a better choice." Gabby managed a smile as Ronnie took both her hands into his. "My lady, my lord, I apologise for the intrusion, but Her Grace would like to speak with you, my lady," Sophie said as she moved closer to them. Gabby felt great relief and immediately pulled both hands away from his grip, almost stumbling as she started to hurry away. "I have to go," she barely said goodbye. "All right, I shall be on my way too. See you tomorrow." Both Sophie and Gabby watched as Ronnie left. "Oh, thank goodness! I wanted to die, Sophie. I thought the whole charade would never end. Oh, good Lord, this is unbearable," Gabby said, going to her knees. "I was close by and I overheard everything that was going on. I felt you needed some help and that was why I stepped in," Sophie explained. "You are truly an angel, Sophie. Only heaven knows what I would do without you." Eventually, Gabby thought, with a twinge of sadness, she would learn to adapt to her reality. She had told her mother that she was a woman and women make sacrifices. That would show maturity. She would have to throw all her dreams and expectations away to make her parents happy, and maybe she would also find her happiness in that. Chapter 2. Lachlan Riddell stood on the second floor of the Audiobook castle, looking at his home. The building was almost in complete ruin. Efforts had started decades ago to repair the castle. Still, the construction was not complete. Now his clan was drowning in debt. Lachlan wanted to rebuild his home and not waste his time and energy on waging war in foreign countries. He felt too old for such. Besides, he had sons that could take care of wars. While they did the fighting, he concentrated on learning new methods of trade. Meanwhile, he had been told by his elders not to trust the foreigners that surrounded their borders. He was no fool to trust his enemies, especially the English. Some years back, Jamie, the Highland prince, had given the Highlanders a purpose to join forces against the English people. Lachlan had been forced to join the battle, and the spoils of that war had lasted them for years. One thing was certain: if there was no way to meet up with his debt, then there had to be another battle. "Why so deep in thought, my lord?" Lachlan turned around to see his special advisor, Rory Alistair. "What else, Rory? I am worried as to how we will survive this coming winter," he replied. Rory inhaled deeply and walked to the balcony. He looked down. "Are you thinking of sending your nephew to war, my lord?" Rory asked. "Nay, I dinna think of such. If there will be any fighting with the Sassenach men, my sons will nae be involved," Lachlan replied. "Your sons or son?" Rory asked. Lachlan gave no reply. He knew what Rory was insinuating. He only had one son, Callum. The other was his nephew. Callum had lost his betrothed in a previous war against the English. It had affected him rather badly, and Lachlan had promised never to send him to fight the English again. He was afraid of what his son might do. Sending one of them to war without involving the other could breed a greater rivalry between them, Lachlan said. Rory inhaled a sharp breath. "That has always been a problem, my lord. What do ye plan today about this unhealthy rivalry between them?" Lachlan shook his head. "I have no idea," he replied. Rory had always been his special advisor, and he always presented an appropriate solution for everything. No one was better suited to be his special advisor than Rory. "Still, my lord, ye cannae avoid it forever. Ye should day something about Master Callum. I am certain that ye are aware of the name that everyone calls him now." "The devil?" Lachlan asked. "Indeed, my lord. They call him the devil because of the way he kills and massacres his enemies. Anyone who falls under the wrath of his blade is doomed forever. Malcolm keeps taunting him day and night for the position of the laird. I am afraid of what may happen between them when you are nae overseeing things, my lord." Lachlan knew Rory was right. That had always been his fear as well. "Two of them cannae be lairds. Only one of them can be the laird," Rory said and continued. "Many of us do not trust Bryce's son, my lord. I believe ye know who the people want as their laird." Lachlan knew this as well. The people loved Callum. His good features and strength had earned him a soft place in the heart of the Scottish women who formed a larger percentage of the people of the town. "If my son becomes the laird, I am certain that Malcolm would plot against him day and night." "Then ye need to do something, my lord." "Well, before I do anything, I need to address the debt issue. Fetch me my son." Rory frowned. "Your son has left, my lord." Lachlan raised his brows. "Gone? Gone to where?" Rory shrugged. "To the usual place," he replied, giving the chief a knowing look. Lachlan couldn't understand, but with the look Rory gave him, he assumed his son had gone to meet the Lady Erlyn Bernal, his mistress. "Are they still together?" he asked. Rory nodded. "Very much so, my lord." "I dinna trust that woman," Lachlan blurted. Rory nodded. "Dare ye plan to come in between him and this woman, my lord?" "No," Lachlan responded. "That would never work. I know my son well, so maybe I can solve this a different way. Tell him to come see me once he gets back." "As your lordship pleases," Rory said, bowing slightly. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. "I heard ye seek for me, father," Callum said as he approached his father. "What is this that I heard of the Jacobites?" Lachlan stood up from where he sat and moved closer to his son. "The Jacobites can wait. There is another matter of importance which we need to talk about, son." "I am with ye, father." Lachlan walked closer to his son and held him by the shoulder firmly. "Ye are a strong man, and I have raised ye well. I am very proud of ye, my child, but how long will this enmity between ye and your cousin last?" Callum was silent. "Father, Malcolm wishes to be the laird, and he would do anything to make it happen." "That must nae happen. This is why I wish ye get wedded very soon. A laird must be wedded. If ye fail to be wedded at the right time, the position of the laird will nae longer be yours, son." After a while, Callum spoke. "There is a woman." "Do nae speak to me of that whore," said his father. Callum was quiet again. He didn't plan to bring up his mistress, but apparently he could tell his father had an opinion about her. "She is a strong Scottish woman. She is wealthy and powerful." "She was Isabella's best friend. Ye dinna think that I would forget that day, ye son?" Callum sighed. "If we canna make day with her, then who day I marry? I day nae ha any interest in any woman, father. I only want to make your wish come true by marrying her. Ye would only ruin Isabella's memory if that happens." Callum was quiet again. His father was right. He also did not have any intention of marrying his mistress. He didn't even love her, but he had hoped to marry her to stand a better chance of becoming a laird after his father. Nevertheless, his father was right. "So, what do we do?" Callum finally asked. His father walked farther away from him as he would whenever he was lost in thought. "Ye go to war with the Jacobites. Ye win. I shall get a wife ready for ye." Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Lachlan watched from the window as his two sons left. This had been his plan. Now he could shift his attention to the problem at hand. "Rory, how many weeks do we have left before we run out of food?" he asked his advisor who stood beside him. "Barely 2 weeks, my lord," Rory replied. "We do nae have much time to waste. We need to strike quickly," said Lachlan. "Aye, my lord, but before we day that, why do we not send spies first?" Rory asked, and to this Lachlan nodded. "Very well. Which of the men do ye suggest?" Lachlan asked. "Basalt and Darragh," Rory replied. "Before we day that, there is another thing which we must address," said Lachlan. "What is that?" "My son needs a wife quickly. I intend to find him a good wife before time runs out." "My lord, are ye certain that Malcolm does nae know of this plan already?" Rory asked. "I am certain. It is only if my son does nae get a wife before his next birthday that Malcolm has an equal claim to my position as the laird. His birthday is in the next 4 months. This means that he must get a wife quickly." "What would you have me do, my lord?" Rory asked. "Can we find a good woman in Scotland?" Lachlan asked, "although I would prefer if the woman is from another clan." Rory frowned. "I dinna understand, my lord. Ye dae wish to have your son married to his own people." "I dae trust our people," Lachlan replied. "I am old, and there is I can do. I am also certain that Malcolm has his people everywhere. There is no one he canna use. I have but a wee time to spend before I go to my father's. Nevertheless, send men out and bring me the names of all the young women ye think are worthy to be married to my son." Rory bowed. He sent for Basalt and Darach, the best spies they had. The town needed to be fed by any means necessary. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. 3 days had passed since Callum was sent off to war. Lachlan lay on his bed while the physician tended to him in his chamber. Rory stood next to him. The sickness had been going on for quite some time, and the trio had kept it as a secret from the rest of the clan. "How long does he have left?" Rory asked the physician. Anxiety was evidently written on his face. "It is difficult to say. I'm afraid, my lord," said the physician to the chief. "I should advise ye to take things easy. Your health fast declines, and your body needs constant rest." Lachlan sat up with a scoff. "I feel fine. I am a strong man, and I will last through this winter. I dae feel sick at all," he said with a cough. The physician looked at Rory, whose head hung with concern. "Do not worry yourself. The cough is only a mild one. I will be fine. Rory, see that the physician is well paid for his effort." Both men bowed before leaving the chamber. After they were gone, the chief stood up from the bed. He walked closer to the window, lost in thought. He knew that the physician was right and that he needed rest. The sickness had been going on for 6 months and there was no known cure. It was the same sickness that had killed his wife when Callum was just 6. He couldn't give in to it now. He needed to be strong until his town and his son were well taken care of. If he died now, he knew quite certainly that he was not going to rest in peace. "My lord, the physician has gone," Rory said as he came in. "Good. I hope ye paid him enough for his effort as well as for his discretion?" "Absolutely, my lord." "Good. We cannae risk anybody knowing that the chief is unwell. It could ruin everything." "My lord, ye and I both know that ye are unwell. Why do ye not want to face it?" "Rory, ye know how much I appreciate everything ye ha' done for me."
Before we continue into the story, do us a favour. Like this video and hit the subscribe button because it helps very much with YouTube's algorithm. If you want the audiobooks ads free, visit our website and select our bundles to save more. Thank you again. Now back to our story.
The other man nodded with a faint smile. "Ye also know that I dae trust anyone aside from ya." Rory nodded. "I am honoured, my lord." "I understand your concern and I deeply appreciate it, but my friend, this is nae the time to grow weak. This is the time to strike. This is the time to do one more thing together. You very well know that our people mustna ken of this sickness until a new laird has been named. If Malcolm or any of his supporters hear about this, he will use it to his advantage, and who knows what he would do." Rory inhaled and nodded. "As your grace pleases." Lachlan smiled gravely and then walked farther away from Rory. "Any word from the spies? Any good news?" he asked. "Certainly, my lord. The city is ripe for the taking," Rory replied. Lachlan turned to face him. "Bring them in. Let's hear from them." "I shall send a servant to fetch them quickly," Rory said before leaving. Lachlan waited impatiently for the men who entered some minutes later. The 2 men bowed. "How was the place you were sent to?" he asked the 2 men. The taller of the 2 stepped forward. "My lord, the land is fertile and rich with food and water. There is gold, and many more luxuries in large quantities." Lachlan nodded with content. He was impressed. "The Earl prepares to give his daughter away in marriage. We also learnt that the Prince Hasne sent them reinforcements. This means we can strike at any moment." "Then this is good. The time to strike is now." "You also said he is getting ready for a wedding?" Lachlan inquired. The man nodded. "Aye, my lord. The ceremony is to happen tomorrow." The chief shot a thoughtful look at Rory. "And that is when we shall strike." The 3 men were obviously surprised. "Aye, that is the time they will be most vulnerable. They will see it coming. Quickly, gather the rest of the men. We need to get this done before the arrival of my sons." The spies rushed out half sprinting. the Highlanders enjoyed a good battle. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Word came down to the Aodh castle on a horse. They had won the war against the Jacobites. That night, the town had a little celebration in honour of their soldiers. They were singing and dancing as they knew how to. After a while, Rory whispered something in Lachlan's ears, and then they both stood up and excused themselves. "What matter is it that canny waits?" Lachlan asked Rory. He wasn't quite pleased that his merriment had been interrupted. "My lord, you seem to have forgotten that you sent me on a mission to find your son a lass." At this, Lachlan brightened up. "Aye, I assume you have more good news." Rory smiled, and from the bag in his hand, he rolled out some parchment papers which he presented to the chief one after the other. Each contained the paintings of each woman he thought would be presentable to the chief. When Lachlan saw the first picture, he asked, "What a fine lass! What clan does she belong to?" "Kincaid, my lord." Lachlan rolled up the paper immediately, looking fully displeased. Rory was confused. "My lord, is there anything the matter?" "The Kincaid have a long history of insurgency. They cannae be trusted, nay, when my son and Malcolm are still at loggerheads. Next." Rory handed him another. When he saw the next picture, he observed it for a while, shook his head and asked for another. This he did until Rory had no parchment left. "My lord, is there something wrong with all the women?" Rory asked. "Everything. When are my sons coming back?" he asked his adviser. "They will be back in 2 days, my lord," Rory replied. "Then we have nae time to waste," he faced the servant. "This is the moment we have been waiting for, my lord," Rory said excitedly. "I send a word out to your sons to take Hawkshire on their way." "No," Lachlan said sharply. "Ye shall day nae such thing. I will take Hawkshire myself." Rory looked surprised. "My lord, but your health. Ye are nae as strong as ye used to be." "I know that, but the enemies daily know this. Prepare for a siege as well." "Very well, my lord." Rory had his doubts, but kept them to himself. He hoped the laird would not suffer fatal injuries on the battlefield. Callum would definitely blame him for his part in his death. Chapter 3. It was a beautiful evening. The sun was just setting. Lady Gabriella and her maid were taking a walk in the town. Gabby had never been someone who enjoyed taking these walks in elegant evening gowns. Instead, she preferred being in secluded areas, listening to beautiful love stories or telling them. Another thing she enjoyed so well was running in the woods with Ronnie, but that day she had other plans. Even though Gabby had never actually made friends with her peers, she had always known that a day would come when she might need to be friendly with them, just to get what she needed. Such a day was that day. She knew where lots of them would usually sit. It was at Johnson's Park, either to gossip, to read, or to make friends. Many people went there for picnics. That was where they were headed. "Are you sure they will welcome us, my lady?" Sophie asked as they got closer to the park. "I am certain of it," Gabby replied. "I am the Earl's daughter. Everyone wants to be my friend." Sophie turned to look at her but said nothing. She hoped her position meant something. When they finally got to the park, Gabby was happy that it was just the way she had expected. There were ladies sitting in 2s and 3s in their muslin gowns and hand gloves, fanning themselves ridiculously in the evening heat. Some were sitting by the stream, others were standing under the tree, while some were just passing away the time on the grass. "So, who do you wish to speak to among them, my lady?" Sophie asked. Gabby looked around. She had come here for one purpose, to learn about the Highlanders. There was just something interesting about those people that she wanted to know about. She kept looking around, hoping to see a familiar face, but she found none. At that moment, she wished she had listened to her mother, who had always asked her to try and make friends when she was younger. "So, what do we do now, my lady?" asked Sophie. Gabby shrugged. She was disappointed. "I think we should go home." Sophie looked surprised. Are you certain that you can find no one that looks familiar? Yes, Sophie. I didn't quite imagine that it would be as difficult as this. If it isn't, Lady Gabriella, said a voice behind them. The two ladies turned around, and Gabby was surprised and relieved to see a familiar face, although they were not those she expected. Hannah and Becky were the two daughters of Lord Jefferson, a Viscount in Hawkshire. Viscountess Elizabeth Jefferson, who was the mother of the twins, had always been one of the unspoken matches for Lady Diane when it came to fashion and social events. Gabby could recall that, the last time the Viscountess was at her mother's tea gathering, she had announced Hannah's upcoming wedding. "Hello to you too, Hannah and Becky," Gabby said politely. She was amazed at how quickly she had remembered their names, even though they never quite got along. "Whatever brought you out of the castle must be something important," Becky stated, giggling with her sister. "Oh, yes, you can say that again," Gabby replied, forcing a smile. "I heard you are tying the knot soon, Hannah," she said to the older of the two. "Congratulations." Hannah smiled. "Thank you, Gabby. But how come I never got any of your letters?" Gabby was confused. "Letters? Yes, I mean, clearly you knew I would be getting married soon, and I got many letters congratulating me in advance. It is rather strange that you heard, but your letter seems to be missing." "Oh," Gabby said as she realised what she meant. "I apologise. I have been rather busy with other things." "Oh, that should be interesting," replied Hannah. "Do tell me what it is that is keeping you so occupied. Could it be the stories you are busy telling everyone that cares to listen?" Hannah asked, exchanging a knowing look with Becky, and they both chuckled. Gabby knew they were mocking her, but she wasn't going to let that rattle her. "Oh, I see you heard. How interesting. Well, you know me so well." "But come to think of it," continued Hannah, "why are you here?" "Perhaps she thinks she will be so lucky to get herself a proper suitor before the king decides to force one upon her," Becky replied, and the two sisters laughed. Gabby also laughed. That is the best way to handle this, she thought. "Oh, I never knew you were this intelligent, Becky. Pray tell what it takes to capture a man's heart, especially a Highlander's." At this, the two sisters stopped smiling, and they exchanged looks again. "What did you say?" Hannah asked. "Exactly what you heard," replied Gabby. "I would like to know everything there is to know about the Highlanders. I suppose you know one or two things, right? Since you are so intelligent, or could I be mistaken?" Hannah whispered into Becky's ear, and then faced Gabby with a mischievous grin. "Of course. What do you want to know about them?" she asked. "Anything you know will be helpful," Gabby replied. Becky stepped forward. "The barbaric Highlanders reside in the mountains of Scotland. They are widely known for their ruthless warriors and their frightful ways." "That is not all," Hannah put in. "It was even said that these barbarians take their oatmeal with human blood, and they elicit bloodbaths at every battle." "Yes," Becky continued, "they teach their young ones to eat the hearts of their enemies raw and to murder their siblings." Gabby could not believe everything she just heard. She could feel the fear creeping through her as she listened to their words. "But that is not even all," Becky said. "There is one they call the Devil." "The Devil?" Gabby inquired. "Yes, he kills for fun, and word is that any Englishman he sets his eyes on is doomed for death. He cracks skulls with bare hands and eats flesh for lunch." After this, the two sisters burst into laughter. Gabby snapped out of her shock. "Have you been lying to me?" she asked, hoping they would at least attest to that. The sisters exchanged looks. "No, we haven't. You can ask your mother when you get home," Hannah said. "We should be on our way, sister," she said to Becky, and together they walked away. Gabby was quiet for a while as she watched them leave. "You can't really believe everything they said, can you?" Sophie asked. "As a matter of fact, dear Sophie, I am frightened to my bones with everything I just heard. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Gabby did go to ask her mother more about the Highlander. She said more than she would normally say. Gabby felt responsibility begin to weigh on her as her mother treated her as a woman for the first time. She used the opportunity to ask for everything she had ever wondered about. While she pressed her mother, her father walked in. Diane heaved a sigh of relief as she saw her husband, but she waited a while before going to embrace him, allowing Gabby to throw herself into his arms. Finally, the three pulled away. "Why don't you excuse your mother and me?" said the Earl. "No, my lord, let her stay. She needs to start learning certain things. She is about to be a woman." Diane could see the surprised look on both Gabby's face and her husband's face, but the Earl shrugged and the three took a seat. "So, will the king be helping us?" Gabby asked almost immediately. "I am afraid not. I did everything I could do, but it was of no use." Diane's heart sank. Gabby was not surprised when she heard this. She had had a feeling that this would happen. "So, what does that mean?" she asked, looking from her mother to her father. "That means we have to protect ourselves and hope that the Highlanders do not strike anytime soon. At the same time, we need to hasten up with the wedding." At the mention of her wedding, Gabby sighed and stood up. "I will leave you two alone. I am certain that you have lots to talk about, which I do not want to be part of." With this, she walked out of the room. "What did I miss when I was gone?" the Earl finally asked the Countess when they were alone. Diane stood up. "You missed the hardest part." "How did she take the matter about Ronnie?" the Earl asked further. Diane shrugged. At first, she was angry, as expected. Then she succumbed. Now she's angrier and more nervous. "I think she hates me." The Earl stood up and moved closer to her, holding her by the shoulder. "Do not think that, Diane. She is only confused. She is even angrier that I am just telling her these things, and she had to find out some things for herself. Where have we gone wrong?" The Earl sighed and held her hands. "We didn't go wrong, darling. We did the right thing. She knows that what we are doing is in her best interest, but you know that she is exactly like you. She is dogged just like you, and would choose to believe what she wants to believe even if she knows the truth." This made both of them exchange a knowing look as they burst into tempered laughter. "So, what would happen if the Highlanders decide to strike?" Diane asked eventually. "We will do everything that is necessary to protect our people, but I am certain that they would not strike any time soon," said the Earl. "Are you so certain of it?" "Yes, but nonetheless we must hasten preparations for the wedding." "Why wouldn't the king listen to you this last time?" The Earl shrugged. "His mind has been poisoned against me. All the time I spent away, I didn't see him until yesterday." Diane sighed. "This is not fair, after everything you did for him. The men that surround him are only looking out for themselves. He is a selfish bastard. I wonder how old he was during the last war with the Highlanders. If he had not become a man then, didn't he hear of it in the stories?" "Do not talk like that, Diane. The walls have ears." "I do not care about the walls or their ears." The Earl sighed and embraced his wife. "We shall be all right, I promise." Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. When the carriage came to a halt, Gabby looked out through the window and was surprised that they were in the woods. Ronnie had brought them to the same place they had always spent time. The same place he had taught her how to hunt rabbits. Out of surprise, she glanced back at him. "I thought we were going to some other place." He smiled and climbed out of the carriage while helping her out. "I understand that the marriage arrangement is making things awkward for you, and I thought I should make everything better. Nothing has changed, except, of course, the fact that we are to be wed. We are still going to be best friends, and I want you to trust me as your partner." Gabby smiled as she heard that. She didn't realise he could be this thoughtful. "I must say, I'm impressed, Ronnie. Thank you very much for doing this." He smiled, and hand in hand, they went to their usual spot at the foot of a tree. The footman who had come with them brought along a basket which he placed close to where they were seated. "My parents think there will be a war. Everyone has been saying it in hushed voices. As a matter of fact, if there is going to be a war, we are likely going to be the first target." Ronnie burst into laughter. "Now, why would you think that?" "Because we are close to the border." "You must not speak of such. We are very small compared to places like Hampshire and Lottingburgh. If there is going to be a war at all, such places would be the greater target." Gabby couldn't believe that he was saying this. "But you do know that the reason why we are betrothed is because of this war." "Well, you can think that, but I believe it is because our parents know better." Gabby was beginning to get irritated, especially since he was now holding her hand and taking it to his lips. "Now, what do you say? Shall we spoil this evening because of a war which may or may not have anything to do with us, or should we make good use of the time we have together?" She inhaled with a forceful smile. "Whatever you say. Daily, I look forward to the day when you shall become mine forever." She was getting tired of having this conversation with him, especially since both of them were not on the same page yet. He had said they could be the way they used to be, but clearly things had changed. "So, we are to have our first kiss today?" Gabby had never imagined that her first kiss would start with a discussion or with a preparation for it. As far as she was concerned, it was supposed to be at the right moment, with the right person. Still, she needed to go ahead with it. After all, she was about to be permanently wed to him. "Oh, yes, of course," she managed to sound excited. She had to be. It was one thing that should get her excited despite everything. His gaze was steadily fixed on her, and softly, he placed a hand against her cheek. Gabby could feel her heart beat very fast as he bent closer to her until their lips were inches apart. When she felt his breath on her lips, she closed her eyes. Their lips touched for a brief moment. She allowed him to kiss her, more out of curiosity than desire. His lips were soft against hers. Still, when the kiss became something more and his tongue began to probe for entrance, she gasped and pulled away with an indelicate shove. "You hesitate?" he asked, looking a bit surprised. "Is it not what you have always wanted?" Gabby wished she could say no, but she lied. "Of course, it is." "You lied," he said deliberately. Of course, Gabby knew she could never lie to him. He knew her too well. She could see the disappointment in his face. "I only hesitated because it was getting deeper," she managed to say. "I still feel it is inappropriate. I apologise." He smiled and brushed her hair with his hand. "Your hesitation is natural. I should expect that in someone as modest as yourself." She heaved a sigh of relief when she heard that. Once again, he was making excuses for her reluctance. He was as understanding as she was uninterested. "In 3 days' time, I am certain that you will have got over this modesty." She couldn't help but blush at the thought of spending the night with him, as her husband. The thought was disturbing in itself, and she found herself resenting it. "Maybe the fuss about first kisses is not really worth it. You should not be too disappointed," she finally said, trying to make things better. I suppose," he replied, his face hardening. "You should stop thinking too much about those love stories. Most of them are not real. Besides, once you become my wife, I would not be allowing such. You will have lots of things to be responsible for, and teaching our children some of that will be unacceptable." Gabby was surprised. She turned to respond, but she stopped. Chapter 4. The day had finally arrived, and Gabby found herself nervous beyond her imagination. She was dressed in a dark blue silky gown and was sitting down while Sophie braided her hair. The door to her chambers opened to reveal her sisters. They both had their hands behind them, meaning they were hiding something from her. They also had a wide grin plastered on their lips. "What are you two hiding?" Sophie asked before Gabby could ask. Slowly they presented their gifts. While Brooke had a silver belt, Berthie had a silver band. "We want you to wear them," they both said at the same time, handing the treasures to Gabby, who couldn't hide her tears. She was really touched. Sophie collected the two items. She placed the silver band around Gabby's head before latching the belt around her waist. "You look so beautiful," Brooke said admiringly. Gabby, unable to say more, drew the two girls to herself and held them tightly. After this, the twins left. They needed to get dressed as well. "You look so beautiful, my daughter," her father said as he entered with Lady Diane. He placed his two hands on her shoulders as he stared at his beautiful daughter. "You remind me of your mother. She looked exactly the same way on our wedding day." "That means she must have been so nervous as well," Gabby joked. "Of course, I was," said her mother, who was already halfway into the door. Gabby smiled as her mother came closer. She was also dressed in a long, flowing, deep red gown to match her father's outfit. A silver band was around her head, bearing a resemblance to the one on Gabby's head. "I am so proud of you," her mother said, kissing her on both cheeks. "I shall greatly miss you." Gabby could see the sadness behind her mother's smile, but she was not certain. "We shall see you in the threshold," her mother said as she left with her father. After they left, she looked at herself in the mirror in mixed admiration. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Gabby gracefully entered the hall. There were many people present, filling the hall with chatter while her father sat in his special seat on the far end of the threshold. She was accompanied by her two sisters who stood before their father, greeted and then took their place beside their mother. Gabby had hoped that Ronnie would be there by now, but he wasn't. The door opened immediately, and several servants rushed in. Fear was written all over their faces. Gabby couldn't understand, but she knew something was wrong. Her parents were no longer in their seat. Everyone was now standing, and people seemed to be panicking. The only thing that came to her mind was hope that Ronnie would be all right. While all this was going on, she heard the noise of a bell ringing. She knew the sound very well. This meant that an invasion was in progress. The Highlanders had come. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. In an instant, Gabby's mother was hurriedly ushering them out of threshold. People were running about in the chaos, preparing themselves to defend their land. "Gabby," her mother blurted as they ran, "take the satchels we have prepared with your sisters along the passage. Stay hidden. Do not come out unless I or your father calls out for you." Gabby nodded quickly. "What about you?" "My place is by your father," said her mother, kissing them on the cheeks. "I shall help defend my home. Now, go." Gabby grabbed the hands of both her sisters and pulled them from their mother. Then they watched as their mother ran the same route they had come. Quickly, Gabby ran to the kitchen to grab as many food she could carry and put into the sack. Then she instructed Brooke to fill the two pitchers with water. "Try not to drip the water," she instructed. "The enemy could use it to trail us." Brooke nodded, and Berthie also helped. While they did this, Gabby slipped to the east wing of the house where her father had his study. She found a hidden door behind a tapestry which she pulled away. Then she led the twins down the entrance, taking the fire torch from its holder. She followed them. The secret room led to a dark tunnel, which was illuminated by the yellow glow of the torch in her hand. Her sisters stumbled over one another before they finally got to a wider room. Here, Gabby found 3 large satchels that were stacked on top of each other. They each took one satchel before Gabby led them down some steep stairs which led them underground to the dungeons. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Many hours later, in the dead of the night, the Englishmen noticed that the Highlanders were no longer in sight. They had locked the gate of the castle to protect themselves. The attackers couldn't survive a siege, or so it seemed. 3 days had passed since the siege. Their fortress and men had fought off several invasion attempts. The number of soldiers stationed at such a castle was unusually small, so everyone had to be on the watch. This made the men really exhausted from constant vigilance and lack of sleep. Several foot soldiers prowled the bailey and the battlement, waiting for any order. "Sir," one of the men said to their leader, "there are no Highlanders afore the gates and at the sides of the gates. Perhaps some of us should go to the villages and see to the welfare of our families." "Do you say that not even a single Highlander is out there?" asked the leader. "None, sir," the man replied. "How is that possible?" the leader asked, riding on his horse and looking from one soldier to another. "We merely blinked an eye, and the Highlanders were gone," the man said. "You blinked an eye and they were gone?" asked the leader, who was the chief in command. His name was Peter. His voice was filled with disgust. "How is it possible that an entire Highlander troop would disappear with their artillery?" "I do not know, sir," said the man, looking frightened. "What I know is that you have not been vigilant enough," shouted Peter. "I hope they have left for good, having seen that we have more resources and men. Have you sent word to Edinburgh and Hamptonshire for reinforcements?" "All exits were blocked, sir," said the man. "However, our neighbours will soon realise our absence." Suddenly, a yell came from the main gate, and the men on the battlements rushed to see the cause of the chaos. Several flickering torches at the gate revealed a figure dressed in rags. "Help!" she cried. "In the name of the Earl, please help us!" "State your mission," shouted one of the soldiers. "I have treated the Mackenzie family all my life," she cried on. "State your name and your mission," another soldier bellowed. "Abby Abigail Goldstein," she cried. "I am injured. Please help." The woman fell to the ground, and the flickering of lights illuminated the blood that poured from her arms. "It is John's mother," said a foot soldier close to Peter. "It is an ambush," shouted a soldier. Before Peter could give an order, John, who was also one of his men, and who must have seen his mother, was now rushing towards her. He opened the gate. "Close the gates! Close them immediately!" Peter shouted, but it was too late. Several men covered in bloody apparel appeared suddenly, their forms visible in front of the gates. Screams of horror filled the night. The English soldiers at the gate started falling over one another as the Highlanders appeared before them. To Peter's horror, music was coming from a bagpipe somewhere, as if murder was only a dance to them. These people were truly savages. Why would they be playing music at such a time? This music instilled more fear into the hearts of the Englishmen. Some surrendered while others fled into the castle. Peter realised that the music seemed to be increasing the fervour of fight amongst the barbarians, their swords slashing and gleaming almost in accordance with the sound of music. His brows were raised as he identified the music. He thought the song was a myth. He had heard of it before. Peter's eyes widened in horror as he saw 10 gigantic Highland men making their way through the gate with a smile. They wore nothing but plaids as they slashed their swords against his men, who dropped like old fruits from a dry tree. He descended the stairs of the battlements to face the enemy. Almost at the same time, more Highlanders emerged through the open gates, riding horses larger than any horses they bred in Hawkshire. The men arranged themselves around the tallest barbarian, who seemed to be the leader. "Call your leader for me," he said in perfect English. "We have matters at hand to discuss." Peter swallowed, trying to suppress the shiver down his spine. "Who do I say calls upon him?" he asked. "The chief Lachlan Riddell of the Riddell clan," the chief said. When Peter got to the main hall of the castle, he found the Earl sitting beside the Countess, his face creased in trepidation. "My lord," he said uneasily. "Have we been defeated?" the Earl asked briskly. "It appears so, my lord," Peter replied. "If so, what are they waiting for? Why have they not marched inside the hall yet?" Lady Diana asked. "Their leader, Chief Lachlan Riddell, would like to speak to you," Peter informed him. "Take me to them?" His jaw tightened. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Lachlan studied the structure of the Mackenzie castle, grimacing in disgust as to how much must have been spent on the decoration and painting alone. The walls were straight, and there were balconies on each floor, which made it easy for intruders to climb in. The number of men who guarded the bailey and battlements was preposterous. More than half of the Englishmen had been killed, and the rest had surrendered. It was really a shameful thing, something the Highlanders would never treat calmly. If any fighter were to desert a battle in Scotland, such a person would suffer a fate worse than dying. "Riddell!" a voice boomed. Lachlan turned around, and his eyes fell upon the aristocratic English Earl who walked out of the castle doors. The Earl had his hair covered in the absurd powdered wig that the Englishmen were known for. Lachlan thought it made them look ridiculous. The man was dressed in their usual attire of expensive leather shoes, stockinged legs, a cravat, brocade waistcoat, and a long brown coat. Lachlan spat in disgust. The Englishman would spend unnecessarily on clothing. "Why have you summoned me?" the Earl asked on getting to him. Lachlan dismounted the horse. "I seek an audience with ye, for as ye can see, we have taken over your land and castle, Sassenach," he said, trying to adjust his accent. The Earl chuckled. "It is quite obvious. Why is it that you seek an audience with me?" "Relax. Ye will hear of my demands soon enough," said Lachlan, walking closer to the Earl. "Ye have two options. Either we kill every one of ye that remains and then burn your castle after we take everything that we want, or we come to an agreement and prevent more bloodshed and loss." He pointed to the distant smoke. "What do you want?" the Earl demanded, raising his voice. "I have grains, I have gold and silver. You can take as much as you want. You can take them and leave us alone." "I believe ye have a daughter." Immediately the Englishman heard this. He turned white but immediately regained his composure. This impressed Lachlan. Maybe he wasn't as weak as the rest of his people. "She is not here. The king has summoned her," the Earl said. Lachlan's brow tightened as he took several steps threateningly towards the man who stood his ground. "Have ye ever heard of how the Highlanders treat liars, especially those who lie to the chief?" Mackenzie said nothing but remained silent. "We gut them alive and feed their remains to the dogs," Lachlan said calmly. "I will forgive ye for lying to me this once." Rory chuckled behind Lachlan as droplets of sweat began to form on the gentleman's forehead. "My daughter is to be married to a man whose family is in good standing with the king," the Earl explained. "If you take her, the king will be most displeased." "I dinna care what the bastard thinks," shouted Lachlan. "A man who cannae send his people reinforcements, a man who cannae defend his subjects, is nae fit to be called a king." The Earl swallowed. "What about a man who desires to steal another man's wife?" "We must take what we came for," Rory said behind Lachlan. "The chief has spoken." "He is not a chief here," shouted the Earl. Angrily, one of the Highlanders came forward and grabbed the Earl by the neck, lifting him several inches above the ground. "Ye dare to gab back to our chief?" the man spat angrily. "We ha' conquered your lane. We can dae whatever we want with ye and your folk. We shall take all your gold and all your silver, burn your castle, and leave no trace of your name behind. Darach, leave him be," Lachlan ordered his man, who let go of the Earl's neck before returning to his former position. Then Lachlan marched forward to the Earl. "Ye will do as I say." he said in a furious tone. "Ye shall give me your first daughter. Ye will also give me whatsoever coin I ask of ye. In return, we will nae plunder your village, rape or kill your women any more. We will leave ye in peace." Mackenzie gritted his teeth. "All right, give me time to decide." "Ye have 10 minutes," Lachlan stated. Plundering wasn't what Lachlan wanted. He only needed something for the future of his clan and to make things easy for his son when he would finally become the laird. Getting the daughter of the Earl was the best step to take for now. This would not only give him binding control of some of the English land, but it would also grant him the fulfilment of his heart's desire for his son to be married. If such happens, continuous war between Scotland and England could finally come to an end. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Gabby stirred a little before opening her eyes. Her legs were numbed from her sister's head, which was lying on her thighs as she slept. For the past 3 days, their mother had been giving them provisions while making sure that none of the servants knew where they were hiding. She had tried to ask of Ronnie from her mother, but for now she said she hadn't heard from him or her father. There was a high chance that he was dead. Still, she promised that once everything returned to normalcy, there would be a search party sent to find him. "Gabby!" Her mother's sweet voice came through, and Gabby released a breath she had been holding. "Mother," she asked, "what is the matter?" Lady Diane came into view in a pool of light she held in her hand. She looked frightened and even thinner. The twins were all on their feet as they waited to hear what the matter was. "What is the matter?" Gabby asked again. "The Highlanders," her mother said in a whisper. She looked like something worse had happened. "Oh, God! Is Father dead?" Gabby asked, unable to breathe out of terror. No, I pray it would not come to that. "So, what is it? They want you." "Why would they want her, Mother?" Bertie asked. "Yes, why would they want me?" Gabby finally asked. "I think they intend to marry you off to one of them," said her mother sadly. The twins gasped as Gabby's heart sank. Comprehension dawned on her and her heart fluttered in her chest. "Why me?" "You are the Earl's first daughter," her mother explained, her voice quivering. "No, I will not marry a Highlander savage," Gabby shouted. Things were just getting worse and worse. "What if she does not agree to this marriage?" Brooke demanded, wiping her face. Her mother looked at the girls tenderly before saying, "Then he is going to kill every single one of us. They will loot the villages, rape me and every other woman in sight. Mother, please do not do this to me. The Highlanders are terrible people. I have heard so much about them. Please, let us run," Gabby pleaded fervently. "My darling," said her mother, "the chief would not let your father out of his sight until we have brought you before him. He is guarding every room vigilantly, and there are so many Highlanders that if we try to escape, they will no doubt find us in no time." Gabby was silent. "Ye there!" A voice thundered above the tunnel, and the girls shrieked in fear. "One of them followed you here?" Gabby asked in resignation. "Yes, I am so sorry," her mother said sadly. Gabby could not stop the tears that flooded down her cheeks. Then she faced her two sisters, who were also in tears. "I am going to do this, not for anybody, but for you, my sisters, mother and father." Her mother nodded, and the four of them hugged. "You are very brave, sister," said Brooke into her ear as they hugged. "I am so proud of you. Please promise me you shall one day return." Gabby laughed sadly. "Yes, my darling, I shall return back home. One day. I promise." In her heart, she was not certain. She followed her mother up the stairs where she saw the barbarian at the entrance of the library. This was the first time she would be seeing one of them. He wore nothing but a woman's skirt. His muscular legs were bare to the knees. Through the days of her finding, she had come across the picture of one of the Highlanders, and she saw how fitting it was. The four of them followed the huge man to the great hall. There were more men with bare chests and kilts. Some of them had their faces painted in blue paint. They all seemed so huge and strong that all the English men in the hall looked small compared to them. Gabby could feel the pounding of her heart as several pairs of eyes scrutinised her thoroughly. She raised her chin as she sighted her father. Even though it was 3 days ago since she had last seen him, he seemed to have aged at least a decade. She summoned courage and walked up to him. "Father?" she whispered, ignoring the pairs of eyes that followed her. "Daughter," replied her father. His features revealed nothing, and his voice was hard. She reached out for his hand, which she squeezed tenderly. "I understand." Her father was quiet, but stared at her for several moments before diverting his gaze towards someone behind her. Following his gaze, Gabby tried not to gape at the man she saw standing behind her. He seemed to be the largest out of all the men in the hall. He looked old, yet he looked very strong for his age. His braided hair had some grey in it, and everything about him seemed strange and frightening. "This is my daughter, Gabriella," her father said to the man. "Gabriella?" the man asked, tilting Gabby's chin forward with his hand. "So, this is the beautiful Gabby I have heard so much about." Gabby felt so tiny beside him, and was also surprised that the chief spoke English well. His voice was rough, thick, and with a heavy Scottish accent. Gabby was surprised to see Ronnie rushing down towards her, but he was restrained by the Highlanders. He seemed to be in a very bad shape. He was covered in both smoke and dust. He seemed to be wearing what could have been called his wedding attire, but which was now tattered. His shoulders were bloody, and part of his face was bruised. Gabby knew he must have been fighting. "You cannot do this," he shouted at the chief. "She is supposed to marry me." Gabby gasped as one of the Highlanders raised his sword to strike him. "No, you promised no more bloodshed," she screamed. The chief sent a signal to the Highlander to leave the young man. "Ah, I see, he is the betrothed." Gabby ran to Ronnie, holding him by the shoulder. He looked really sad and terrible. "I am so sorry, Ronnie. I have to do this." Ronnie smiled weakly. "You are finally having the adventure you have always wanted. I am certain that deep down within you, you are excited about this." Gabby frowned. "What are you talking about?" Before Ronnie could answer, the chief asked the men to take him away. Gabby watched as a man lifted Ronnie up and threw him out of the door. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Minutes later, Gabby was saying goodbye to her sisters, while the Rydell men waited impatiently for her. She crouched to the height of her two sisters as they said their goodbyes. "Do not forget your promise, sister," Brooke stated, sniffing back her tears. Berthie was quiet, but only embraced Gabby. Lastly, she embraced and kissed her mother goodbye, but her father was not in sight. "Where is he?" she asked her mother, whose eyes were red with tears. "He couldn't say goodbye," she replied. Gabby knew that her father was probably hiding away in his chambers out of shame. She sighed before leaving with the Rydell men, taking several glances at the home she always knew. This was the day she was meant to leave, but she was headed in an unexpected direction. Chapter 5. Night had fallen, and the smell of roasting meat blended with the evening breeze. They had travelled far and were closer to home. Now they set their camp in the middle of the woods. The men were all seated around the burning firewood that they had built for heat. Their horses had been fed and tied to a nearby tree. Callum sat by his lonesome and looked among his men, listening to their stories and laughter. He was sitting a little distance from them, but he could still hear their voices. "So, I told my sweet wife not to leave me out in the cold, but the next thing she said was, 'We are nae married, ye heathen,'" said one of them, and the rest laughed. Even Callum managed to smile. Barclay, one of his strongest men, was narrating the night of his wedding. The men often did this any time they missed the warmth of their wives and the comfort of their home. I wrapped my arms around her wee body and then moved my hand up her wide buttocks. The next thing I knew, she was begging me to take her right there. The men cheered and clapped excitedly. "Here, here," shouted Malcolm, who was also sitting with them. Finally, the noise died down, but short snorts and conversations could still be heard. "My lord," said a man walking close to him. Callum recognised Efgarad's voice. "Efgarad, why are you nae with the men?" he asked. "Because I am tired of stories told by drunks," his friend replied, sitting beside Callum. "But ye are married. You need things like this to keep body and soul together." I know so, but what about those who are unmarried?" he questioned, giving Callum a meaningful look. "Those who are unmarried will have their mistress to think about," Callum replied on purpose. "Mistresses canny take the place of a wife," Efgarad said. "How many mistresses have ye?" Callum asked. "None," he replied. "Then ye do nae ken of that which ye speak," Callum replied. "I know one thing for certain, nae amount of bosoms could replace the bosom of my beautiful lass," Efgarad said, gulping the drink in his hand. "Careful, ye are starting to get drunk. I am nae going to sit here and listen to your stories." Both men chuckled and went silent. "Do ye love her?" Efgarad asked after a while. "Of whom do ye speak?" Callum inquired. "Your mistress," Efgarad replied with contempt. "Love? No, I do nae hate her and I do nae love her. She gives me happiness when I need it," Callum replied. "That is nae happiness, Callum. That is relief," Efgarad said, but Callum shrugged. "Means the same to me. Ye see why ye need a wife. Ye do nae even know the meaning of true happiness anymore." Callum was about to respond, but a loud cheer from the men interrupted him. Malcolm was standing up and addressing the men. He had a cup of wine in his hand, and he seemed a bit drunk. "To all our beautiful lasses at home, who we cannae wait to make love to when we get back home," he said, and the men cheered once more. "But ye have nae wife at home, my lord," said a voice amongst the men, and there was a loud murmur. "Aye, replied Malcolm. "What kind of a brother would I be if my brother mourns his wife for many years, while I warm myself up with my own wife every night?" This was followed by a loud applause from the men. "What is he doing?" Efgarad asked Callum quietly. "He is mocking me. That is what he's doing," replied Callum. "We all miss Isabella so much," continued Malcolm. "She was like my own very sister, whom I loved most dearly." "Tay, Isabella," he said, raising his glass, and the men did likewise. Callum collected the cup from Efgarad and stood up. He was walking closer to the men. Suspecting the trap, Efgarad tried to pull him back with his kilt. Callum pressed forward, and he had to let go before he stripped his friend in front of his men. "I do appreciate this unnecessary kindness of yours, sweet brother. I am sure that Isabella would be most grateful for this," Callum said and continued. "However, if I had nae misunderstood ye, did ye say ye refused to take a lasses for yourself because ye are mourning with me?" Malcolm nodded with a smile. "Aye, brother, we loved Isabella together. I will take a lass when you take a lass, albeit ye have a mistress, but I dare say she can never replace the fair Isabella." Now, there was a great silence among the men. Callum fought the urge to strike down his cousin right there, but he could see the look on Malcolm's face. It was as if he was trying to challenge him. He looked at Efgarad, who shook his head slightly, passing him a message to not do something he would regret. After a moment, he raised his glass. "Isabella was indeed the fairest of them all. I am glad that ye ken that after all ye were also in love with her for many months before she chose me." The silence grew, and so did the tension. Callum could see the anger piling in Malcolm, but then his lips twisted into a wide grin. "Tay Isabella, may she rest in peace," he shouted, and so did the men. When Callum drank the rest of his drink, he couldn't help staring at his brother, who was also staring at him from the rim of the cup he held between his lips. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. For Gabby, the journey took forever. She had slept all through the night in the carriage that her father had sent along with her. The savages only had horses. Her father had made sure that she left with some comfort. When she finally opened her eyes, it was already morning, but they were still on the move. Her carriage was in the middle. She felt guarded like a prize, but she wasn't sure that was how they saw her. She finally managed to look out of the carriage. The high mountains were speckled with shades of green and brown. A large black stone and several woods were located at the centre. She thought it must be a storage of some kind. To the east rose ruined and broken grey towers, against a thatch of cottony clouds. She felt a pang for her beautiful Mackenzie castle. Her mind was full of despair, knowing she might never see its lush rolling land and gardens again. She was no longer in her wedding gown. The chief had made her change to a more comfortable gown before leaving. What lay before her right there was a dark land with harsher colours and topography than she had ever seen. The design of the huts was nothing compared to the houses in Hawkshire. She sighted a small stream splashing from the mountains, flowing weakly, barely watering the few fields to the south. She wondered how this clan of barbarians would survive the coming winter. She remembered how her father had designed their canals to lead water from the main source down to all of the crops. Now she finally understood why the Rydell clan invaded her lush land. They were certainly starving, but that was no excuse. The horses came to a halt and the men dismounted. Several men and women ran towards them. There was a loud noise of jubilation. Gabby scowled. Here they were, jubilating after causing her people sorrow. The door of her carriage was yanked open, and she saw one of the men she had seen before. He was the same man that had stayed very close to the leader. He was really tall, but not as big as the leader. Nonetheless, he was as fearful looking as the rest of them. He seemed a bit younger, perhaps in his 40s. "Come down," he said. Gabby frowned. She was accustomed to someone holding her hand, but she would never hold the hand of these savages. She jumped out of the carriage with some of her things, which she kept in a satchel. When she saw the castle, she was surprised. It was bigger than hers back at home and was built atop a hill. It overlooked a fair-sized village next to a loch. The stone walls around the bailey were about 4 stories high, a display of strength. "My father's built these in the Norman style," said the leader, looking at her as he dismounted. "The stones are mortared, and the walls are 10 times thicker than the walls your people build. Nothing will harm ye here," he said. She could sense the pride and a bit of sorrow in his voice. "It is magnificent," she managed to say. "Someone should help the lass with her things," said a voice behind her. It was the leader. A young lady who reminded her of Sophie came through and took the satchel from her. She could feel everyone staring at her. Some whispered in hushed voices while others laughed, speaking in a language unknown to her. They made their way through. The leader was telling her everything about the castle. He seemed a bit nice, and she was beginning to relax. She settled her mind on accepting the things that were happening to her. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The young lady led her into a room where she dropped her bag. "Thank you," she managed to say to the lady. "I shall come back with a tub and pails of hot water," the girl said and left. Gabby smiled wearily and immediately bolted the door as the girl left. Then she sank to her knees. Her shoulders trembled as she cried in grief. She missed her home. How would she live with people she didn't even know, and whose way of life was completely odd to her? She didn't even know the man she was to marry. What if he didn't want her? What if he had no heart and treated her as a slave? A sound on the door interrupted her. She quickly wiped her face and stood up to open the door. 2 Riddell men came in with a wooden tub, and another man walked behind with 2 pails of steaming water. Lachlan and an older-looking woman followed them. The men lowered the tub beside the fire and splashed water into it before leaving. "Gabby, this is Arinda. I know you're used to having maids help you with all sorts. She will take care of you. She will help you get dressed and prepared for the arrival of your husband. Your wedding gown is still in the satchel. You shall be wearing it for the ceremony." Saying this, he left while the woman faced her. "I am Gabby," she said to the woman, offering her hand. "Arinda, I have a soap for ye," the woman said, handing her a scented soap. "Thank you. Quickly, before your water runs cold. The master will soon be here," the lady said. "I shall return with some cloths for the ceremony." Gabby watched her leave. She was relieved that the 2 women she had met had not been cruel to her. Still, she had an inkling not to expect the same from all the women she would be meeting there. Even if she married one of them, they would still consider her a stranger. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Callum and his men approached the castle, with flamboyant jubilation behind them. While his cousin and his men cheered with the people, he was riding fast towards his father, who waited at the entrance with open arms. He had received disturbing news on getting to the village that morning. Not only had his father invaded Hawkshire without him, he had also brought back a wife for one of his sons. "My son, ye are welcome back," said his father, kissing him as they embraced. Yet Callum was not smiling. Malcolm dismounted and hugged their father, kissing his hand. "I am glad that ye both arrived safely, and with so many victories to tell me about," Lachlan announced in front of the men and the rest of the people. "Father, why did you not wait for us to come back before you laid a siege on Hawkshire?" asked Callum. "Well, ye and I both know the reason, son," replied the father. "And what is this that I hear of, father?" began Malcolm. "I heard ye came back with a Sassenach lass." "Aye, son," replied their father. "I came back with a wife for your brother," replied the father. Callum fumed instantly. Since he heard the news of an English girl in his home, he had imagined the worst, which was happening right now. He whispered angrily into his father's ears. "Can I speak with ye in the room, alone?" "Aye," replied his father, and they both left. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Malcolm's face tightened as he heard that Lachlan had brought the lass for his son. He wasn't surprised. His uncle only claimed to love him on the surface, but he only cared for his son. He signalled to one of his loyal men, Hyde. "My lord," said Hyde, bowing to Malcolm. "Where is this lass?" he asked. "In the eastern room, close to your brother's," Hyde replied. "Ye may go," Malcolm replied. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. "Calm down, son, this is for your own good," said his father. "Nay, father, why would you even think of invading a town right now, with your health?" Lachlan sighed. "Calm down, I am all right. It was a mere siege. And ye could have been killed. Our men could have been killed," Callum continued. "None of them is hurt, and ye and I both ken that this is about the young lass, not about our men." "Father, I dae nae wish to marry," he said sternly. "Ye hae nae choice any more, son. This lady shall be your bride, and the ceremony shall take place very shortly. I would advise ye to gae clean up and get ready. Accept her as a gift from me to ye as the future laird of the clan." Callum frowned. Had his father finally decided to make him the laird? Before he could argue further, Lachlan left. He remembered Isabella. She would turn in her grave if he married a girl from the same race that took her life. He fell into a nearby chair. He held his head as if to crack it and end his pain. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Gabby was dressed. The gown was a lot different from the one she had earlier worn, but it was beautiful nonetheless. Yet she didn't feel beautiful. A day before, she'd been very nervous, knowing she would be getting married to Ronnie. Now, she was even more nervous. She didn't even know who her husband was going to be this time. Her palms were sweaty and her heart was racing. This was her second wedding within 3 days. Maybe she was dreaming. She did have wild dreams. In this supposed dream, Arinda stood with her in the room, busy arranging the clothes into the closet. A rapt knock sounded on the door and the woman went to answer. After talking for a while, she faced Gabby. It is time. Chapter 6. The music started in the great Rydal Hall. Many people were present, most of whom were there to witness the marriage of their beloved future laird to a strange English lass. Some were there to see how she looked to confirm the rumours of how refined the Englishwomen were. Callum stood at the front with his father, but his cousin was yet to join them. He was angry and impatient. He still couldn't believe that his father had chosen to pick a wife for him among the people he loathed the most. Where was the sense in that, he thought. Many thoughts flickered through his mind. Perhaps he could just leave and tell his father he didn't want to be part of this. But then, if this were to happen, Malcolm would finally become the laird, and he would break his father's dying heart. He turned to his father and was about to say something, but he stopped when a collective stir from the crowd interrupted his thought. The lady appeared in a gown of ivory and gold satin. Her delicate white veil brushed softly against her face, revealing the golden brown tresses before joining the train of the gown. Pearls and beautiful stones encrusted the stiff bodice of the dress, moulding her bosom. Her thick red hair fell in waves to her hips, swaying as she moved. She looked like a medieval princess and nothing like the daughter of a liege lord. Their eyes met through the veil and he felt his heartbeat quicken. He looked away just in time to see his father looking at him. He seemed pleased. Callum cursed under his breath. He knew that his father must have realised that he found the lady attractive. He promised himself not to look at her anymore. They were married before the people and the priest. When it was time for her to repeat her vows, Callum could tell she must have been crying, for her voice shook with a great sadness and terror. After the blessing, he placed the Rydal plaid on her shoulder, and his men cheered. They were husband and wife. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. All through the ceremony, Gabby was quiet. She was frightened to her bones, especially when the priest had called out her husband's name. Callum Rydal. That was a name her people back at home had called with fear. He was the devil of the savages. It was said of him that he once drank wine with the skull of an English man. Yet, she couldn't imagine it was this fearful man that would be her husband. He didn't look like the many stories she had heard about him. As a matter of fact, she had actually been a bit relieved that she would not be getting married to an old man. Callum was a bit taller than Lachlan. His blonde hair reached almost to his shoulders. There were several marks on his face. She could tell it was as a result of numerous battles. His lips were thin and cruel. This, combined with his other features, gave him a dashing appearance. Gabby felt herself blushing while looking at him, but then he had looked away. That was before they were wedded, before she heard his name. Minutes after the ceremony, the feast had begun. They all sat at a very long table, drinking and eating. Gabby sat between Lachlan and Callum, who had earlier excused himself. Gabby was quiet. She didn't have an appetite, not even with the way the savages were eating their food with their bare hands, food they had probably taken from her homeland. She suddenly remembered stories that these people tore people's flesh with their hands. That meant it was possible that the meats they were eating were not even animals. What if it was human flesh? She could feel vomit coming and stood up abruptly. This made everyone look at her. She immediately regretted her action. "Seems our new wife is in a hurry for her duties," one of the men said, and the rest roared in laughter. "Going somewhere?" Lachlan asked. I just... Gabby stuttered, unable to come up with an excuse. Oh, she didn't even touch her food, said a woman close to her. Why? Are you afraid we have poisoned it? Asked another man. Gabby was quiet. She couldn't think of something to say. Let her be, said a voice behind her, and everyone was quiet. Oh, Gabriella, I do nae think ye ha' met my other son, Malcolm, Lachlan said. Gabby turned towards the man who had come to her rescue. He was also very tall, but with darker curly hair. His chest was as wide as a barn door. His lashes were full and long. They seemed to give him a feminine look. He also had a cocky smile plastered on his lips. My lady, he said, taking her hand and lifting it to his lips. Everyone laughed as he had greeted her in a pure English way. Gabby, however, found it soothing. She smiled. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Forgive my people, Malcolm said to her as they both walked down the hall. He had somehow managed to take her away from the crowd, having sensed her displeasure at the event. Thank you. I really appreciate it, she said. They were both taking a walk down the long passageway. Still, why? May I ask, have ye decided not to eat? Our food is nae all that bad, unless ye are planning to starve yourself. Gabby smiled. I am afraid because I have heard so much about your people, she said, careful not to use the word barbarians. Malcolm laughed. Ye should not believe everything ye read or hear. We are normal people, just like ye. The only difference is the way we live and our tongue, Malcolm replied. They were now at the balcony, looking below. The view down was beautiful, but she soon saw that part of the building was in a complete ruin. How long has it been like this? She asked Malcolm. As far back as I can remember, he replied, smiling. Gabby could feel his intense glare on her, and she finally looked at him. You are very beautiful, he said, placing a hand warmly on her cheek. You should have been mine, not my brother's. Gabby couldn't decide whether to take that as a compliment and to reply with appreciation, or if she should just remain quiet. While she battled with this, a servant came in. My lord, the chief would like the lady to come back to the table. Malcolm smiled and took her hand. Ye heard the man, shall we? Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Callum watched as Malcolm took Gabby away. He frowned. He had excused himself to have a private time alone in his chamber, which was directly atop the balcony where the two had stood earlier. From there, he could see them right below him. He saw the way Malcolm had caressed her cheek with the back of his hand. Callum was certain that his cousin could tell that he could see them. He must have brought her there on purpose. He sighed, tightening his grip. He hadn't even spoken to her yet, and Malcolm was already trying to come in between them. Anyway, he didn't care, or did he? Is everything all right? Callum turned around to face Efgarad, who had just entered the room. Aye, everything is... I came to offer my congratulations on your wedding. Callum scoffed. He walked to the table to pour himself a drink. She is such a beautiful lass, Efgarad said on purpose, but he was quiet. I hope you're nae angry at your father for setting this up. I am, Callum growled, but he had his reasons. Perhaps he believes that this will bring peace between us and the Sassenach in some way. It could, Efgarad replied. I doubt that, stated Callum. Malcolm can have her for all I care. Efgarad didn't understand what he meant by that. Why would you say that? What does your cousin hae to do with this? He questioned. Callum explained what he had just witnessed. He may just be trying to ken her, said his friend. We both ken that is nae true. Nonetheless, it is too early to conclude now. Let's just go back to the party before father starts wondering where I have gone. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The night came, and the town was lit with life. The streets buzzed loudly with music, and everyone was filled with an excitement fueled by spirits. Some wrestled and bled joyously, while others cheered, cup in hand. Gabby had never seen anything like that. The only feasts she knew were held on special holidays, or when her father had a visiting dignitary. Even at such, there wasn't much dancing and playing as she was witnessing now. Laughter and noise could be heard in every corner, and smoke somehow filled the night sky. Lachlan had earlier retreated into the castle along with his advisor. She didn't like Rory much. Her husband sat beside her all through, ignoring her and busy watching the scene of fighters or cheering them along. Sometimes he would laugh at silly jokes, but he never once looked at her. The other nice man she had met, Malcolm, stood at the other side. He had also engaged in one game or the other, but had spent most of his time looking at her. At some point, Gabby began to feel uneasy because she was liked by another brother when her husband had totally ignored her. She didn't know what to make of the whole thing. She couldn't understand, but at least she was a bit relieved that perhaps he would ignore her throughout the night and would not demand his marital right. "Is everything fine, my lady?" asked someone behind her just in time as her husband had stood up for the 100th time that night. Gabby looked behind her and saw Arinda, the lady that had dressed her up, the one that was given to her to be her maid. "Yes, everything is fine," she replied, trying to sound as relaxed as possible. It must not have worked, as she felt sick immediately after she said that. "Oh, I hope you're not about to fall sick," cried Arinda. Gabby let out the breath she had been holding in. That happened to be the time Callum said something to the wrestlers and everyone laughed. Perhaps looking at him from where she sat had given her away. "You do nae wish to sleep with your husband?" Arinda asked, but thankfully not very loud, for she would have been greatly embarrassed. "Is it that obvious?" Gabby asked. "With the way ye have been drinking, aye, it is. Luckily tae a woman and nae tae men." Gabby looked at the container in her hand, the one she had been drinking from for the past few hours. She had lost count of how many drinks she had taken, but the drink was really delicious. She hadn't taken any meal except the drink, which she had found really satisfying. Arinda stood up from behind her to come right in front of her as the noise grew louder and the people clapped. They both watched Callum from across the fire, which was at the centre. No doubt he was really a fine man, especially with the way his hair shone from the light. When he yelled, his Adam's apple moved up and down. This was one thing Gabby found really fascinating about him, yet he seemed terrifying to her. "Are ye afraid of your husband?" Arinda asked. "Yes, I am. He is, after all, the devil I have heard so much about." Arinda gasped. "Oh, that! Ye shouldna believe everything ye hear, my lady," she said. Gabby frowned. "I heard he could break a woman's bone and eat it." This made the older woman scream with laughter, but she composed herself when a few eyes turned to her. "Lord Callum is one of the kindest men you would ever know, my lady. Aye, he is ruthless, powerful, intimidating, and hard to please. Yet he is very calm and kind-hearted. Many people have faith that he would be chosen as the next laird of our clan." Gabby frowned. "A laird? What is that?" "The leader of our people," she replied. "What about the chief?" Gabby asked. "He is old and nae as strong as he used to be." "So are Lord Callum and Malcolm brothers, or—" "They are cousins," she replied without saying anything further. She rose to her feet. Gabby was about to ask more about them, but kept quiet on seeing Lachlan coming in. Everyone must have seen him, for the noise died down immediately. Gabby was confused. "What is it?" she asked Arinda, who had somehow found her way back to her former position. "I think he is about to make an announcement," Arinda whispered into her ears. "What announcement?" "Who the new laird is going to be," Arinda replied. Gabby watched as the other man, Rory, brought out a scroll and the men gathered around him. "The new laird of our gracious town has been decided," he shouted. "Ye have all been waiting, and now the time has come for new leadership," Lachlan shouted. Gabby couldn't believe that Arinda had said this man was old. To her, he still looked very strong and agile. One of my sons would he continue in my stead, for I am old, and I canny lead you further. Lachlan continued. Gabby watched as Malcolm found his way to the front, where Callum was standing right before Lachlan. The new laird is Callum Riddell. Immediately the announcement was made. Everywhere went agog. The noise grew louder than usual. The music increased tremendously, and the tune was haphazard this time. The people jumped and somersaulted. Gabby was stunned to see that the people could get even wilder. She could see some men lift Callum onto their shoulders while he laughed. She managed to look at Malcolm and could have sworn she saw a look of disappointment, but which was immediately replaced as he hugged his brother. Finally, Lachlan brought the two brothers together and spoke to them. They both kissed him on the cheek, and then he left, after which the music started again. Arinda, please, see me off to my room. I'm really tired and would love to go to bed soon. Are you certain, my lady? Arinda asked. Gabby nodded. Her husband didn't care if she was there or not. She shouldn't have to celebrate with him. Yes, please, she replied.
Scan the QR code or click on the link in the description to read the full book. The full audiobook will be available on YouTube in a few days. What did you like the most? Comment below and share this video on your social media and with your friends. Watch one of the following videos. Subscribe to our channel, like this video, and hit the notification bell to not miss any new audiobooks. Thank you for watching.